Marlee, welcome to Data Nerds, and thanks so much for being here. I don't know if you have anything that you would like to share with us before I ask my first question. Just thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course. No, I don't think anything specific to share ahead.
All right. I'm going to let you introduce yourself for the most part. My first question is, I've kind of given her a heads up on some of my questions, not so much on yours. But so just take some time to tell us your story. We met at Belmont. You were a student of mine, and we got to know each other there through some hackathons and things along this line. But how do you get from Belmont to Spotify? Tell us whatever you'd like about that journey.
Sure. So I went to Belmont originally to study audio engineering. And halfway through, I switched to a double major in computer science. While I was at Belmont, I did a few internships, Emma, digital reasoning. And from there, basically, I kind of lined myself up to get a full-time offer with digital reasoning. And they offered to basically fly or take me out to New York, because that was kind of my goal, to move to New York. And I live in New York now, just to preface that. But yeah, so I started my full-time career at digital reasoning, basically kind of more as just a general software engineer, a bit more back end. I kind of took on a bit more of like a data project while I was at the company, something that nobody really had any idea about, and I just kind of offered myself up and ended up like learning, all of the data infrastructure and stuff like that, and ended up really loving that. And I think at that point, I kind of just heard about the term data engineer. But once I did hear that and saw some job listings, that kind of resonated a lot with me based on what I did at digital reasoning. And so from there, I went to a company called United Technologies, which is now Raytheon. They're a big like conglomerate, and they own a lot of like aerospace companies and stuff like that. They basically had like a digital accelerator type thing. They hadn't really put much thought or energy into kind of progressing their technology. And so that was kind of our task to do that. And like, I guess at that position, it was a lot of learning about like scalability, working with like scripts basically that took people at this company like 2 weeks to run or something, and just switching it over to like Spark, and it runs in like an hour. So a lot of like low-hanging fruit, but just kind of helping revamp their technology and get them up to basic standards. And then yeah, after that, I went to Spotify. I've been here about 4.5 years. And I can go into a bit more detail later, I think, in further questions. But yeah, I think my kind of learning process prior to this has been a lot of like learning data and learning like core technology and stuff like that. But I think at Spotify, I've had the opportunity to more so kind of become a more well-rounded engineer and like focus on a lot of leadership and mentorship and things like that, which I have a good like interest in, and have kind of taken to that at Spotify. So yeah.
All right, thanks. I'm going to go a little bit about the out of the order that we started, because I want to jump into, let's talk a little bit about more about Spotify, your role there, not necessarily what a day looks like, but what are the challenges that come? Yeah, just tell us a little bit, dig deeper into your role at Spotify. What have you done there over the last 4 years?
Yeah, a
Or
lot.
whatever you'd like to tell. You don't have to go through 4 years.
Yeah. So I guess to preface, my title is Senior Machine Learning Engineer. I'm a lot more of a data engineer in case people have machine learning questions. It may not be able to answer them. I'm kind of easing into that role, But basically my first like 3.5 years at Spotify has been as a data engineer. My first team was basically building out kind of like an audience generation platform for any kind of artist promotion. So if you get like a pop-up on your Spotify that says like a brand new album for you or something like that, we were basically the ones determining who should get those promotions. So working with a lot of huge data at Spotify, like determining based on how often someone streamed or like kind of what their affinity was for different artists, determining basically who would most benefit basically from a promotion like that. So we kind of had like a very bootstrapped version of this at the beginning. And then by the time I left that team, it was like a big kind of platform that other teams could then use and build out audiences. So that was probably about 3-ish years. And then kind of in the meantime, I guess like Spotify does these things called embeds, and you can kind of go sit with another team for like a month up to maybe a quarter or something like that. And so you can kind of seek that out yourself, or if teams are like just needing a hand or something like that. And basically, since I have a background in audio, not specifically really audio and ML or anything like that, but being that I was at Spotify, it was like a good opportunity to try to get my hands dirty in some type of audio work. So I've used those embeds 2 or 3 times now to find teams that are kind of more audio focused. So I've done one where we were kind of productionizing a language detection model for all of every song on Spotify, basically. And then I did another one where we were basically detecting good places to insert ad breaks within podcasts. An interesting problem, but ended up being quite audio focused. And then, yeah, so the current team I'm on now was brought to me kind of through the podcast ad breaks team. But my team now currently sits under like the ads organization. And so we are kind of detecting relevance or predicting relevance, which is a bit vague. And we're still trying to kind of define what that exactly looks like. But using things like transcripts of ads, or in the future, probably processing the audio of the ads itself, detecting kind of like what ads are best for certain people, and even detecting like, is this ad just the most annoying sound you could ever experience? And so like nobody is going to want to listen to this, things like that. So we're looking at it in a few different ways. But yeah, so hoping to, again, get kind of into the audio aspect of things within that. And yeah, so I've been on this team about a year now.
Okay. I saw Scott Hawley's eyes light up as you mentioned the audio a bit, and I think he may have a question along those lines before too long. Before we go on, I want to encourage Sam, if you see questions in the chat, particularly as they relate to what's coming out of Marlee's mouth recently or in the near time, that if you could kind of wave your hand at me and let me know that there is a question. Is there anything at this point that you see? You must be on mute.
Thank you. I do have one question already. I think it may be a little outside of scope, but can we get tips on creating LinkedIns from a soon to graduate Bachelor in Computer Science?
Yeah, let's hold off on that one for now. You need to screen those a little bit. And let's...
Yep. So one from Rebecca Percy just came in. When you use one of the embeds at work, do you still keep up with your other team's responsibilities, job responsibilities? Just wondering what the experience is with extra work.
Yeah, so you basically don't keep up with your other team's responsibilities. But Spotify is very into kind of continually learning. So this is like a thing that basically, like, even if you want to get like promoted, like it's good to have a few embeds under your belt. So it's like a totally supported thing to do. Whether you are looking for like a new team to join, like with the potential of staying on that team after your embed, or if you're just going on it for a few months just to learn something new. But yeah, you can kind of totally zone in on that embed and not have to focus on your old team.
This brings me back to an earlier question. Sorry, Sam, it looks like you have another question, but as an academic, and Marlee and I have had this have this conversation maybe a year ago or so about your learning process. You know, you and I knew each other through Belmont and a certain type of learning in the classroom, or maybe even through a hackathon or something like that. I'm curious how learning has changed for you and developed in your path from university to digital reasoning to Rayathon to now Spotify, especially the way you talked about that embedding. I'm curious how, yeah, just what does that look like? How effective is it? How, yeah, tell me a little bit. I'm babbling now. Go ahead.
Just in terms of like my learning process throughout the years, I guess.
Sure. And how has that changed? You know, I know it as a university professor, but learning happens in a lot of different ways. What are you learning now? How is that? Is there a journey? Is there a process? What works for you now?
Yeah. I mean, I think I pretty much get everything I learn from where I'm working. Um, I'm definitely not someone that like goes out of their way after hours to, read up on every book and like do my own projects. Like I very much separate work and life. Um, but I think I didn't fully feel confident doing that when I like first graduated. So I feel like it's important to know that like you can very much separate, like you don't need to always be working on like a side GitHub project to get where you want to be. Because that just didn't end up being me. um, but yeah, like since I've been especially like a machine learning engineer, by name at least, I've been trying to kind of live up to that and try to more so become a machine learning engineer, or at least be able to kind of speak to it a bit better. And I guess to preface, once I joined this team about ad relevance, my title was kind of changed because that was the position I was taking on. So they kind of hired me as a machine learning engineer with the idea that I would kind of learn on the job. But yeah, so specifically for machine learning engineering, it's been a lot of like basic things like taking online courses, which can help to some extent. But I think I learn a lot better when I'm kind of just like on the job working with somebody, getting into a project. So I think like being able to speak up and just like ask to pair with people, sometimes can feel annoying, but a lot of people are like super willing to do that. And I think I've learned probably the most from doing that and like setting up even just like informal mentorships and stuff with people around me at the company. I've been able to kind of do these like little mini projects with people. So that has been really helpful. And specific to Spotify, I guess, but we have like learning Fridays, so we can kind of turn off normal work and like focus on a project that's somehow like relevant to our work to some extent, but it's, kind of just for us to learn. So I've taken advantage of that and done a lot of just little like mini projects and stuff like that. And I think, yeah, like I guess in terms of data, just finding other people that are within that data world. At Spotify, there's a lot of kind of like overall overarching data clubs that you can join. So whether it's like in your part of a company or there's like a whole company-wide one, So staying involved in things like that, I think, have been really nice. Just like listening to people's problems that they have going on and realizing that they're probably pretty similar to your own, and yeah, learning about new technologies and stuff like that has been really nice. So I feel like that was all kind of Spotify specific, but yeah, I think I've gotten a lot of my learning just from being mentored by people and, you know, seeking out those mentorships. And yeah, people are very willing to like take you on and help you. And that is kind of how I got where I am.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful thing. I'm going to ask you to step back a little bit. It sounded like you've had this pristine, perfect pathway, and you and I have talked a little bit different. You know, you've been at some really great places, starting with digital reasoning and moving up, and you're at kind of what you and I've talked about, maybe your dream job with the interest in music and audio engineering technology and the data and programming. But did it just flow that way? You and I have talked about your experience at the beginning of Spotify. How did you get to Spotify, if that's a fair question? Answer that however you'd like.
Yeah. I mean, no, it was definitely not easy. Spotify was kind of like my dream company coming out of college just because of my background. Um, and you know, thinking about a company as your dream company, like it feels like maybe you'll get there like 10 years or so after you graduate or whatever. But yeah, so I mean, I think I probably first applied, I don't know, maybe even before I graduated or something. I don't remember, and probably never heard back. But I think, I mean, looking back now, I'm very glad that I took on, you know, maybe smaller companies or jobs that maybe weren't my top goal, just to learn what I could in those situations. But yeah, I applied to Spotify, I think, before I started at United Technologies and got through like the first round and then didn't pass. So that was super demotivating. But it was at least an experience, and like I got to practice my interviewing skills and stuff like that. And thankfully, the recruiter and I like had a decent enough connection that I was able to like reach out to him maybe a year or so later, and he was totally willing to like let me reapply. So I think that was a good lesson, because even though these recruiters are talking to so many people, just staying in contact with them was very useful for me. And yeah, so I applied again, probably a year and a half later, and ended up getting it. And at that point, I feel like I had done quite a few interviews and like felt way more confident. Kind of, I mean, interviews will always be awful, but can't lie about that. But I felt definitely a lot better, could speak to things a lot better, and yeah, had interviewed for a handful of other places in the meantime, just in case Spotify didn't work. So I think I came back with a lot more confidence, but definitely felt like it took a while and felt like it might not have happened. So in the end, it feels like luck sometimes. So if you happen upon like the right interviewer and things like that. So yeah.
But also keeping that connection with that recruiter or someone. Everybody on the screen knows that I preach the networking, and many people are going to be referred to a job and things like this. I've been talking too much. Sam, are there any questions that are there? I can imagine there's not.
There are lots of them. So first one we got, in your transition to machine learning, are you focusing more on creating models, or are there other aspects of ML that are your focus as you're making this transition?
Thanks.
I can talk.
Yeah, I haven't gotten too deep into actually creating models. So far, I've kind of left that to more of the experts on my team. But more so the way I've tried to kind of get into it is just like implementing even like the pipelines that will run the model, or I mean, definitely like prepping the data that any of the machine learning engineers would need on my team. So definitely still kind of doing the data engineering aspect of that, but more so just learning like the easiest way to implement a model and not starting from scratch necessarily, but like just using TensorFlow or something to create like a very simple model just to get kind of the architecture of everything and how things plug into each other. But I found that to be a lot more useful, even just like working with other machine learning engineers, being able to kind of speak to that side of things is a lot more helpful, I think, than knowing, you know, how to like tune a model. So that's kind
And a
of how
lot of
far I'm
times,
at.
and correct me if I'm wrong, many and most of these titles have different demands or expectations at different organizations. And many times that machine learning engineer is the one who takes the work of the data scientist and moves it closer toward production. I'm curious what Spotify sees as the role of the machine learning engineer. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, it definitely varies a lot. I would say like at prior companies, I think machine learning engineer is also kind of a newer term, but at prior companies, it was always like a data scientist that was building models, implementing them, putting them in production. And at Spotify, it's very different. There is a machine learning engineer who is really like building a model, tuning it, training it. But then they also kind of have the task of prepping the data, getting the data that they need, and productionizing it. So I think there's a lot more to it at Spotify. And then I would say like um, a data scientist at Spotify is almost more of an analyst. So it's definitely like if you're looking for positions at different companies, it's definitely worth like really understanding what they are. Because yeah, a data scientist at a prior company would not probably be happy with what it is at Spotify. So it's interesting. And I think even data engineering too, like at Spotify, I would say it's closer to like a back-end engineer. You're writing like Scala pipelines basically to process all of this data that Spotify has. Whereas, you know, places I've interned before or have interviewed for have been a lot more kind of on the, I guess, data analyst side or kind of just working with SQL or something like that, kind of a bit more surface level. So I've seen it firsthand how different it can be, but Spotify is probably the most different that I've seen.
Some good wisdom there, but to look at the job description, but beyond that, to also in the interview talk with the hiring manager and the team to find out exactly what the expectations are. Because I think all of that is still standardization has not happened. Maybe it's happened at some companies, but not so much. Sam, other questions?
Yeah, try and combine a couple of these. So hearing what languages, platforms, tools do you use? And then a follow-up kind of how important are data profiling tools when learning about the data and how have they helped you doing your projects?
Cool. So languages, on the machine learning side, it's a lot of Python. And then there's also a lot of like Spotify specific technologies. So I don't know that I'll have a hugely exciting answer to all of this, but yeah, so languages, Python for machine learning, data engineering is all Scala. And at my prior job, it was Python, and then prior to that, it was also Scala. So definitely like most comfortable using Scala. And then prior to Spotify, I've pretty much only used Spark for data processing. And then at Spotify, we use Shio, which is kind of a wrapper on top of Apache Beam. Works pretty similar to Spark, but it's like Shio is built in-house. So we have like the engineers there to kind of help us out whenever we're debugging something. And then we use Google Cloud for everything. So all of those basics, data flow, BigQuery. And for data profiling, there's some like Spotify specific tools we use. But honestly, if I'm looking at data and trying to get a good picture of what's going on with it, or like figuring out what fields we need or what's available, a lot of the times, at least at Spotify, I would just use like a BigQuery, which is just like a SQL database, to kind of look at the data. And then we have like a platform on top of that that you can kind of visualize it through a Spotify specific UI. But yeah, nothing super fancy. I think I gravitate towards just something like BigQuery a lot.
Had another one just come in related. Do you have any favorite resources for diving into Scala?
There is a book. I would have to look it up and send it out later. I forget what it's called, but honestly, like at Digital Reasoning is where I kind of learned Scala, and it was completely on the job. Nobody at the company knew it, and I kind of offered myself up to be the one to do it. Which again, that's just like the best way I learn. And so just having a project, knowing that you have to learn this because nobody else knows it and there's not really anyone to look to for answers, is kind of how I went about it. But yeah, I can definitely also share that book post meeting.
Cool. And yeah, I send something out after the meeting and I can include it there. So while we're kind of in the weeds, someone asked, how do you go about breaking down and processing all of the audio on Spotify? Such a large amount of data to come through. How long does that take? And what would test sample sizes look like on that scale?
So I can probably speak to some of this. So I'm not doing anything with audio currently. We're kind of experimenting a bit, so we don't have anything in production. But there is also another Spotify specific tool that we have, that is basically another wrapper on top of like an Apache Beam, that is meant for processing audio. So it makes it a little bit easier and kind of less that the engineer has to do. And it's kind of very easy for it to connect to the Spotify catalog and read in any audio that we need, and kind of chunk it up into whatever the model needs, whatever size and length, basically. But yeah, I can't really speak to like production size of data in terms of like sample sizes and stuff like that, just because I haven't really gotten to that point on my team. But yeah.
I want to jump into you. You've mentioned your teams several times, and I'm curious what that team looks like. Are they all, yeah, how the makeup, how you interact possibly with other teams, wherever you'd like to take that. Is it machine learning engineers or how do you, yeah, just tell us a little bit about that. Who do you work with?
So every team at Spotify at least has an engineering manager and a product manager. That's pretty much a given. And then on my team, we are 4 machine learning engineers. Everyone else on the team is pretty much a core machine learning engineer, and I'm kind of hybrid. And then we have 1 data scientist. And then occasionally, depending on team or like point in your project, you might have like a user researcher or a designer or something like that. Like on my first team where we were working with that pop-up, we had a designer that was kind of designing out what that would look like and things like that. But in terms of who we're like talking to day to day, Spotify has like a pretty flat structure, so it's not like we need to go super high up to get things done. We sit around maybe like 4 other teams that are kind of like sibling teams to us. And so we work pretty closely with them. They are there's another team that's building different kinds of models for serving ads. There's an actual like ad serving team, one that deals with like auctioning of ads. So all kind of similar, and we kind of have to work together in order to like merge code and create new projects and things like that. So it's a lot of kind of talking directly with the engineers on different teams to figure out how we want to build something, which is nice. And so, yeah, it's like, as long as you can kind of get an okay from probably just like your manager, maybe one level up, you can kind of pitch a lot of things to do as a team member, which is nice. We don't have like a architect type position, which I was kind of used to at other companies, which has been like a good learning experience because we're the ones kind of architecting anything that we build. So good like leadership opportunities, I think, because of that. So yeah, I think I answered most of that.
Oh, sure, for sure. I guess what I almost stopped thinking when you mentioned the data scientist, because what you mean by data scientist, is that really a data analyst, and what is their role on the team?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, you just got me stuck when you said that earlier, and now, yeah, I'm just curious their role on the team.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends what you think of a data scientist again, but they basically are doing a lot more digging into the data. So like we had a kind of version 1 of this relevance model that we put out a couple months ago and did an A/B test. And so that data scientist was the one kind of reviewing all of the results at the end of it, kind of determining what kind of impact we made, if we made an impact, if anything looks good versus bad, and like determining if we can do like a full rollout. So that's like an example, I guess, of something they've been working on lately. But yeah, it's a lot more at Spotify, at least, like digging into the data and finding, kind of like product insights out of it.
Right. No, thanks. Sam, I feel like I'm taking up too much time. Are there other questions?
Yeah, kind of two related to working with teams. So in your experience, have you found your path to be an individual contributor or manager? And what are your opinions on both when it comes to working in tech?
A good question. So far, I think I lean to the individual contributor. And I can't say that like I always will. I think I'm still like in flux. Right now, I think I'm just at the point where like I feel like I haven't learned enough and I want to keep digging into that, especially now that I'm doing more machine learning. But I could definitely see like once I get to a point of being bored, that I would go that direction. I think I feel pros and cons about management. Knowing if I could be a good manager and everything negative that comes along with that. But I definitely see like it making sense. I think like after leading a lot of projects on like a technical level, it kind of gives you more confidence, I think, in that track. But as of now, I definitely like the idea of being like a tech leader more than a people leader.
Right. So this is one of my questions, but it's a follow-up to that. It may be too redundant, but a little different angle. So what's next for you? And that may be at Spotify or your next step. You may be in love with Spotify and want to be there until you look as old and gray as I do. But yeah, just what's next? What keeps you challenged? What keeps you interested? Where are you headed?
Yeah, I think looking back, or I guess thinking about it prior to being at Spotify, I feel like being at a company, a tech company, for like 4.5 years is kind of long. And so yeah, like I think I've been very lucky at Spotify just because you're kind of encouraged to switch teams and switch like product areas and things like that and do those embeds. So it's really hard to get bored. once I started getting bored on my first team after like 3 years, I was encouraged to like check out new teams and find a way to like still be interested in being at Spotify, which was really nice. And yeah, I guess like keeping me challenged. Spotify has this term called like T-shaped. I'm not sure how widely known that is, but kind of like having your domain as the vertical and then like kind of branching out horizontally. And so like that's a huge thing again for like promotions and things like that. You have to kind of prove that you're T-shaping into other domains. So again, that like has really helped me out in learning machine learning. I'm, by no means like, I don't think I could be hired as a machine learning engineer outside of Spotify. So being given that opportunity to like take on that title and kind of learn as I go, has been plenty a challenge for me that like keeps me interested and wanting to like stay on my team and at Spotify. So definitely not like feeling bored yet, but I think, when I do, it's like I could either switch companies or I could stay at Spotify and like find new opportunities. But it's hard since I have such an interest in audio, like the idea of going anywhere else is kind of scary at this point.
Sure. No,
Because it's definitely the field that I want to be in.
great. Great. So I'm going to put somebody on the spot for just a second. John Berryman, I saw that you put up a chat. Do you have a question? Could you go ahead and state it yourself?
Sure. So every company's got the hard and annoying data problems. Like at GitHub, we had a customer that used our GitHub repos like S3 buckets. They just like tons of raw data, not even code, they're just data. What are the annoying problems that you've got at Spotify?
Good question. I think like, I guess an interesting data problem, I guess, like that I have on my current team, is just like our lack of user information that we have. So like we have, I know every song you've streamed in the past 10 years, but I don't really know like what you're interested in past what's on the platform. So I think that has been a big struggle. Like a lot of the data that we have to go off of is stuff as simple as like if you thumbs up or thumbs down an ad, which is not something most of us really do. So it's interesting to think kind of outside of the music realm of things at Spotify, like what kind of data we have, and how you can really work with that to better like somebody's experience on the app. So that has been a bit of a struggle. And then I guess not for me, but I know like fraud is a huge issue at Spotify. So like building out, I guess kind of like on my last team, like our audience platform, we're kind of determining what users should get one of those pop-ups based on like how much they listen to an artist. And you can't always kind of just go off of like raw counts of stuff like that, because there's like so much fraud. So thinking a lot about like how to circumvent stuff like that has been pretty prevalent. I guess also one more, Spotify is huge, and that kind of causes a lot of repetition and stuff going on. And also being that it's very kind of flat structured. So there have been times where it's like, we built this project out over a few months, and then you find out a few months later, like there's another team in like Stockholm that did that like 2 years ago. So I think issues of like being kind of a flat structure, but also at the same time, it lets you kind of build a lot faster. So there's pros and cons, but can be frustrating.
Answer your question, Sean?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. A couple of other people, and forgive me. Betty Ann Chakowski, curious if there's a question. Also, while I'm bugging Betty Ann, Jason Myers would love to hear what your thoughts are and kind of what you brought here, what questions you might have. Anybody?
I'll
Actually,
Oh.
sorry, Betty.
This is Betty Ann. I'll say that I don't really have any questions, but Marlee, I find like your journey and your insight to be really outstanding. So thank you for coming this evening and sharing this with us.
Yeah, thank you.
A similar sentiment. I was at Emma when Marlee was there.
Okay.
And so I actually came back just to hear her story and to see all the stuff that had happened since then. But I do kind of tangentially have a question. And it's actually related to something you just commented about, like the view of the world that Spotify has from data is mostly from their internal application and perhaps from event partnerships if they have some sort of embeds in the app for those event partners. Obviously, you can't share what Spotify's planning to do in the future, but like I'm curious if you had an opportunity, what do you feel like is that missing link in that particular case? Like what would help you get a more complete picture other than someone's advertising viewing habits and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think really the only thing that we could really benefit from is like third-party information like that. Like we do get like demographics and basic things like that. But we've tried to be creative in what we're using. Like we've looked at like podcast listening and trying to kind of match if there are any categories in podcasts that might relate to an ad. So we're kind of stretching a bit, but in terms of information we have, like podcasts are a little bit more relevant than just like music. Based on someone's music, you probably can't detect if they like, you know, car ads versus whatever. But yeah, I think short of just having like third-party data about users, it's kind of tricky. But right now we're just kind of using ad feedback that people give and building off of that and looking kind of for like similar users to the ones that give that feedback. So yeah, it's a tricky problem if you don't have the data.
That's cool. I hadn't really thought about the podcast. I guess you also have audiobooks now that are kind of that same way, right? You can kind of at least profile what they like to listen to.
We haven't looked at audiobooks yet, but yeah, that would probably actually be maybe better even.
A couple of others. So Darwin, you had a question. Could you go ahead and ask your question from earlier?
Yeah, thanks for coming and speaking. It's been really interesting. Yeah, I'm kind of curious, like, with kind of these models that you put out, like, how do you like report on KPIs, like upwards, like execs or managers, because obviously I don't know if they appreciate like a precision or accuracy or F1 score or anything like that, right? Like, how do you report like your team's like success and progress upwards?
Yeah, I think some of that probably also falls on like a data scientist role. I would say a data scientist is kind of always in communication with our product manager, and from there kind of goes up to whoever needs to know the information. But I think it's kind of nice, I guess, with this flat structure that we're kind of hidden from all of that. So a lot of the times, like we would maybe present our results or something in like an all hands or something like that, or maybe to some key stakeholders. But from there, it kind of is handled a bit by like product managers and data scientists who are looking into the data and determining, what's good enough or if we should roll something out. But yeah, I think because it's so flat, it's kind of different, but a lot of it is kind of handled by the managers and they kind of take it wherever it needs to go so we can kind of focus on building. But again, it might be a little bit different if you were like a core machine learning engineer and dealing with some of those stats like that.
All right, thanks, Darwin. So Preston also has a question, and I think quite a few others might be interested in kind of leading in. So how do you get to Spotify? So Preston Robinette.
Sure. Hi, I'm Marlee. Thanks for sharing your experiences. So I'm a student right now studying computer science, and I was just wondering, based off of your previous internship experience, if you've hosted an intern and how your maybe perspective has changed on the internship process or the actual work that an intern does. Thank you.
Yeah, our team actually had our first intern this summer. And just because I've had such an interest in like mentorship and leadership and stuff like that, I was kind of the main engineer helping to hire the intern along with my manager. And I would say, like, I guess knowing what I know now and kind of in the, I guess, at least in the interviewing process, I think we were able to kind of, I mean, it's hard at Spotify, like we got, I don't know, at least 1,700 applicants for one internship position. So it's like, yeah, if you don't ever hear back on a role, like things like that are why. But like once we did narrow it down, like being able to choose from someone that is like getting their PhD versus someone who is like a junior in their bachelor's degree. We ended up choosing the junior in their bachelor's degree. And I think partially because that resonated with me, and just like wanting to give someone an opportunity in a position that I was also in, because I only have a bachelor's, but so not necessarily like needing to find the person with the most experience, because like that's kind of the point of an internship at the end of the day. Like you don't, I mean, yeah, you don't need to like prove yourself to the extent that you would if you were getting hired full time. So yeah, I think just like on that front, learning to like just see what people have to offer and know that it's like not going to be the same as a full-time position, but and then just giving that person like the experience of being on a team. And I know a lot of internships can be kind of like solo positions where you're just like doing a project for one quarter or semester or whatever. But I think we had a lot of success in our intern where she came to stand up every day. She gave updates, like she did demos at our all hands and was like very much just a part of the team. Like it didn't even really feel like she was an intern. And I think based on her feedback, like she got a lot out of the internship because of that. Because I think a lot of what you learn is like team dynamic and like the little intricacies like that. So yeah, I would definitely like look for that in an internship looking back now if that were me.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
So I'll go ahead. Yes. I'm thinking about Scott Hawley and Paul Garland. I'm not sure if either of you or both of you may have had Marlee in class, but as professors at Belmont, do you have any questions? Put you back on the spot, Marlee, excuse me, exam time, I don't know.
Well, one question I'd written in the chat earlier, and maybe this is too specific, but I'd mentioned that I'd laughed when Marlee talked about identifying the most annoying sound ever, because the previous library that Spotify used for approximate nearest neighbor search was called annoy. Presumably the ANN of the word annoy will match with approximate nearest neighbors. And they recently switched to this thing called Voyager, and it's open sourced and supposedly runs really lightweight on CPUs. And I was just wondering if you had any, if you're using it much, or if you had any connection with Voyager, and if not, that's fine. I was just kind of curious.
Yeah, we do have these pipelines on our team that were kind of passed down to us, but they are basically like to find lookalike users. So like some advertiser can like feed it like a seed audience, and we will return, like the 4 nearest neighbors of each of those users, based on all of the information that we have at Spotify, basically. But we, on that one, still use Annoy. So we actually haven't even adopted the latest Spotify technology. So no, I haven't actually used it yet.
Yeah, cool.
Paul?
Yeah, I believe, Marlee, you were in the software engineering class, weren't you? Yeah.
Yes.
I was curious as to whether that was of any help to you at all. If you if you ended up in a place that actually did have an agile or a strict software engineering. I know it's a small world. My son-in-law, actually, Lance Roggendorf, was from was in Emma and Alon for many years.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, I think like classes like that were definitely useful because it's like you can learn, the basics of Java and whatnot in school, but like it's going to be so different when you're actually on the job, because chances are you won't use Java, and chances are you're not building something in this like perfect environment. So I think learning a lot about like Agile and Scrum and things like that, like definitely will push you more towards being that professional right out of school, because like nobody's really expecting you to like know everything about engineering coming out of school, but just knowing the basics of like an agile process, because that's not something that anyone really teaches you once you're on the job. You're kind of just like expected to ease into it, I guess. So I think it's definitely useful information to have coming into it, so you're not totally lost when you're starting your first job. So definitely.
That's good. I have one more question. Are you hybrid or remote or on site?
I am a majority remote. During COVID, I moved up to the Hudson Valley, so I'm like an hour away or so from the Spotify office in Manhattan. So I still go in maybe like once a month or something, but Spotify is very nice in that sense that you can be totally remote now, and that they're not gonna go back on their word, it seems. I think they've committed too far at this point. So yeah, it's a good mix, I think, of people that go into the office and people that don't, but I would say the majority of people don't, and people are spread all over.
Any thoughts of going overseas?
Probably not, but I mean, Spotify is based in Stockholm, so it would be very easy to if I wanted to.
Yeah.
So it is nice to have that option.
I just saw a note. I'm going to pick on John Berryman again. He listed some things that you've probably already seen, but I won't make note of them. Following up on Betty Ann's comment, I really love Marlee's career hacks, and he lists 4 of them. Learn on the job when possible. You've emphasized that several times. The second, jump toward the things that no one wants to do. I think that works in all parts of life. Her example was learn Scala and data engineering. I'm not sure about the data engineering that no one wants to do, but number 3, take opportunities to switch roles within the job with the embeddings and other opportunities. Number 4, find informal mentorships. Yes, applause for Marlee, and these are some of the things that we've tried to push through Data Nerds as well. So thank you. Are there other questions? Yes, please.
I would also fully endorse Paul's follow-up comment. 4 years at one place tends to be a long time. Maybe with the exception if it's your dream job, then that's a pretty good exception. But yeah, good on you.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, but realizing that I've been there that long. It's like you kind of at some point have to decide, like, are you going to stick it out for a very long time, or is it like soon time to switch jobs? But definitely I've been in positions where like people that like looking at people's resumes, and someone that's been at a company like 10 years definitely gets kind of looked at a second time to like, know if they've really learned a lot in that 10 years or if they're kind of just comfortable. So yeah, it's interesting because it doesn't really feel like that at Spotify since I've switched teams and stuff so much, but yeah, it's interesting.
There's 2 or 3 others that have asked, and I'd like hearing their voices rather than mine. So Afsana, Caden, go ahead. Do you have you had a couple of questions on there, I believe, and I probably abused your the pronunciation of your name, but go ahead.
You're right. I'm Afsana. And my first question is, what kind of data does Spotify collect to fit into its machine learning models?
What kind of data?
Yes.
Oh, just data.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Basically, anything you do within the app is basically collected. So in terms of interacting with the app, like clicking, skipping, if you like minimize the app, everything like that, which has been more prevalent to like my current job, my current team. But then, I mean, like the bread and butter of Spotify is their streaming data, obviously, which builds all of the algorithms. But yeah, we basically take like the most raw streaming data that you can get. And then different teams kind of go on top of that and then build out their own data sets that are specific for certain things. So like someone will have like a cleansed streaming data set, and then someone will have like an affinity data set that takes that data and like builds out affinity scores for like a user artist pair. So there are so many data sets at Spotify, but a lot of them kind of stem from that core streaming data and then just like general user data, basically.
And one more question is about the machine learning techniques that they frequently use.
I don't know if I can speak to that super well, just because I've kind of sat on the sidelines of people actually building out models. But I've also kind of found it tricky just because Spotify has such specific tools and stuff to build out their models that a lot of it's not totally transferable. So an issue that I've tried to kind of work through as I'm following like tutorials and stuff.
Thank you.
A couple of others. Teresa Weitzel, you have a question?
Yes, thanks. And thank you, Marlee, for coming and speaking tonight. It's really interesting to hear your story. My question is kind of more, I guess, about y'all's use of GCP as a platform. So when you're doing machine learning models, when you're kind of building them out, maybe designing them, do you use Vertex or other core GCP services, or do you have a specific Spotify environment that you develop in? And if you've used other clouds, how does GCP compare in your experience to like Azure or AWS or, the others? Thank you.
Yeah. In my experience, at least, we have used Vertex. I'm not sure if everyone does at Spotify. I think machine learning is kind of the one weird thing at Spotify where it's like Spotify has all this like internal tooling, and it can't always keep up with like the latest machine learning languages and tools and whatnot. So it's kind of a bit all over the place depending on what team you're on. But I have personally used Vertex. But in terms of GCP in general, my last company used Azure a bit, but like very surface level. And then prior to that, at Digital Reasoning, everything was like on-prem because we were working with banks and stuff like that. So we couldn't use the cloud, which was very scary going to a company that was using the cloud because I felt like super behind and really had no idea what that like meant to work with. So definitely learned that on the job, but it all ended up being okay because I think a lot of people ended up having that same experience. Kind of just depends where you're working, and if you're working in finance or things like that, a lot of the times you can't really use the cloud. So I don't really have any comparison against any other ones per se, but yeah, GCP has been good in my experience.
And then Daniel, I think you had a question.
Hey, thanks again, Marlee. This has been fantastic. Just the self-awareness factor, I'm curious. First, it's more of just a funny, interesting question if you've stumbled across any outliers, any users that just like one band or things like that. What are some interesting stories from the data? And then second, do you find I'm assuming you use the product yourself. Do you find yourself behaving differently, knowing that your sort of minute behaviors are going to come back and affect your future experience?
Yes, definitely to that. I would say the one thing that has stuck with me the most is like basically to get anything in your algorithm, you have to stream it for 30 seconds. That counts as like a royalty stream. And so anytime I catch myself like having a bad song come on, I have to like rush to skip it before the 30 seconds comes on. But yeah, and I think just like being aware of what I'm listening to, because I know it's going to affect algorithms and stuff like that. But I think I never really listened that much to like Spotify generated playlists before being at the company, like all of the like daily stuff, and there's so many, but I think I've actually like leaned a lot more into those now that I'm actually there and kind of can see behind the data and like know what goes into it all. And I forget what the first half of your question was.
Oh, have you found any particularly memorable users, even if you don't know their names?
Good question. Not specific users, I would say. I mean, like doing looking into like ad feedback as of lately, not that exciting of users, but like there are certain users that will like thumbs down like an ad or two a month or something, but then there are like a handful of users that do it to like 500 plus ads every month, which is kind of sad because right now we're not currently doing anything with that feedback. So they're just like leaving this feedback and we're not doing anything to help them. So it's a little sad, but we're working on it.
That's great. Well, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to everyone. Marlee, my last question is, have we missed anything? I know we have. Is there anything that you brought that's on your mind that you just would love to share? Any projects, any advice to share? What's on your mind that giving you one last shot?
I mean, I guess go back to like the points that John made, like trying to like just like learn on the job, like he said, and taking on things that maybe nobody is interested in, or maybe people are, but like speaking up and taking that if it sounds interesting. Definitely have learned a lot about, you know, like standing up for myself and speaking up for myself, and seeing it work a lot. So I think that has been a huge thing, and just kind of trusting yourself and slowly like minimizing imposter syndrome has been very nice. And it takes a while to get there for sure. But yeah, I think just like taking the opportunities that show up has been super helpful. And I guess countering that with like not taking on too much, because I guess as a senior engineer now, I've had to kind of a bit step back and like let more junior engineers take on just like the small little tickets and stuff like that that I got so used to doing and like enjoying. But kind of taking on that new role of being a senior engineer and like taking on more mentorship and leadership and stuff like that has been like a fun new challenge. But yeah, there's always things to learn.
Well, thanks so much. It's been a delight, as I expected it to be, to spend the last hour with you. Thanks for everyone that's been with us. It's been a wonderful evening. Hope you've enjoyed it. Any last questions at all before we take off?
Yeah, I got one.
All right, Scott.
Yeah, my question is, we focus so much on the computer side of things. I want to ask about how Marlee's audio domain expertise, and particularly any instruction that she learned while at Belmont, if that has played any significant roles in her, performance of her duties with Spotify.
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably only took maybe like one class that kind of, I think you maybe had taught it, that was like using MATLAB to like build.
Eric Tarr probably taught that.
Okay, maybe that. I think that was probably the closest thing to combining audio and engineering. And I think there are probably more courses since I left, which was sad. I think there was like a second part to that I missed. But it sounds like things are going more in that direction, which is nice because if you're interested in audio, it's not only about recording in a studio. Like there's so much machine learning around audio now. So yeah, I wish I had taken more classes and been able to do that. But it sounds like Belmont's like in a better position to set people up for success in that now. So that's exciting.
Thanks again, Carly. If we could give her, this doesn't work very well on Zoom, but thanks so much. And I say Carly, my niece is named Carly, and that keeps coming out of my mouth. Forgive me. Marlee, I do know who you are. One thing I would like to say is Marlee and I have had conversations on and off for the last several years. She's done this before. We've recorded a couple of videos for my class while I was at Belmont, and even to send back afterwards. She's gone back and talked to some groups, I believe the MAA, ACM, a group, or actually it's a group you were helpful in starting. Remind me.
Lean In.
Lean In. Yeah, I was gonna say it wrong. So part of what John, Betty Ann had brought up, kind of having that initiative has been part of Marlee, and again, something I would push so strongly. Something, and forgive me for rattling on, but we had, when I was at Belmont, there were probably anywhere 120, maybe 150 majors and minors in math, computer science, data science, but there was a core of, say, 30 of those students that took the initiative to darken my door and to be connected with industry outside of that. I think those things make such a difference. Marlee, got the right name, did that through several hackathons and internships and things along this line. I think Data Nerds is the same way. We have 2,500 members now, and there's a handful of you that are always here, but also Tim is a great example of this. He's involved with this conference. He's knocking on doors. He's at every meetup, not just Data Nerds, but Nashville Data Engineers, Data Science Nashville. It really takes Daniel also the same, trying to be involved and engaged. I'm not mentioning all your names, but Carly is a wonderful, Marlee, I can't get Carly out of my mind. Marlee is a wonderful role model for how to build that career. And again, I appreciate you giving back and being with us here this evening. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll look forward to seeing you at Data Nerds in the future. Have a good night. Thanks so much. Happy 2024.